Greetings, everyone. Patrick King here. Welcome. First and foremost, this is my final meeting as president of National Capital Chapter. It's been a great year. Thanks for all your support. It's been a crazy year. I'm not going to recap the year. It feels like it's been more than a year, but the chapter's done a lot of great things, and I do want to thank all the board members who have participated this year. A lot of pivoting, a lot of changes to the way we do business, both at our clubs and as a board member of the chapter. So thank all of you. Today is our annual meeting and election. We have great education lined up, but this is my shout out for everybody. Not only vote this afternoon, but vote November 3rd as well. It's also a great time. We're at 50% with our membership goal with new recruits. If there was ever a good time to have your coworkers join the National Capital Chapter and CMAA, I can't think of a better time. The chapter has kept my sanity in check, as with a lot of others, because at least we get to see each other through Zoom. And we did have the golf tournament at the end of August, which was great to see a lot of smiling faces. So it's a way to stay in touch and stay connected. So if you have anybody that is interested, please make sure that they join the chapter. November 9th, we're going to have best-selling author, award-winning speaker and coach, Chris Attlee, to present Staying Focused on Growing Education and Motivating Others. It's going to be a joint meeting with the Greater Baltimore chapter as well as the Virginia chapter. So more on that, but please be sure to sign up for that. November 17th, for all you coffee lovers, we're going to have a virtual coffee tasting courtesy of our platinum partner, Avendra. And then it's not just for our chapter, but it's for anybody that you want to join during that time as well. And more information on that is forthcoming. So once again, thanks for all your support, everything you've done over this unprecedented time. And it's been a pleasure serving as your chapter president, but it's time to get on to more business, and I'm going to turn it over to Margot. Margot, who's on mute. There we go.
Thank you, Patrick. And thank you for what was a challenging year as president. Definitely haven't seen anybody in person in a long time. So we're excited to announce that the dates for 2021 education have been selected. We have a couple of months and dates that you'll see that are to be determined topics. We're just giving ourselves a little bit of wiggle room with depending on whatever happens with COVID and the ever-changing times that are happening. A few highlights. One, you'll see we have a 2-day education this year coming up in February. It's going to include the Master's Roundtable, which we hope to do in person, and then an awesome speaker, Rachel Sheeran. We're bringing back Tim Richardson, who's supposed to speak to us this year, but we decided to keep him in person, so hopefully he'll be back next year. We have Kevin McDonald coming in the summer months. Hopefully with all of our interns, he can come and brighten up their spirits and bring some good education. And then we have a 6-hour workshop on communication. Crazy to think about, but next October with our 2021 board meeting with Alyssa Carpenter and Jen Brown. Kate will be adding the calendar to the website, and we'll be sending it out in the next couple of days. We are looking for clubs to host for 2021 educations. We don't have any of those selected yet. So if you're interested in hosting or want to show off your club, please let us know so we can start slotting in those dates. And now I will be handing it off to immediate past president and nominating committee chair, Alicia Cicerone.
Thank you, Margot. First and foremost, thank you for the time and consideration of the nomination committee, Patrick King, Bob St. Francis, Will Duthie, and Cole Warnacki. I'd like to announce the newest members of the National Capital Chapter Board by acclamation: Emmett Gallagher, Sam Onesorgi, and Alexandra Saris, and their screen shall be up for everyone to see across the board. Congratulations to the newest board members. I'm truly looking forward to a wonderful year ahead under the leadership of our new board. This is my final meeting as immediate past president, and I truly appreciate the privilege to serve. And now I get the extreme pleasure of introducing two of my friends, Annette Whittley and Jennifer Burgess, as we head into the education this afternoon. Jen has over a decade of experience working for two of New York's top restaurateurs, with a wide range of knowledge developed through years of on-the-job experience. Having worked all front of the house, line level, and management positions across a diverse portfolio of concepts and in both domestic and international markets, she has leveraged that experience into a passion for training and operations. Through her consulting company, Plus One Hospitality, she has evolved her expertise beyond restaurants and has formed a long-standing relationship with the Four Seasons Hotels and Resorts, for whom she is now the preferred food and beverage operations trainer for both existing properties as well as for new openings and renovations. In addition to the Four Seasons, she has recently added an array of private clubs in both the US and Canada to her portfolio of clients, as well as various other luxury brands. Her areas of focus include product and service training, operation evaluation, restaurant, bar, and kitchen design consultation, and management development. Annette is a passionate hospitality professional with over 17 years of experience. Over 13 years with Four Seasons, she worked in restaurants, bars, recreation facilities, banquets, in-room dining, and was involved in multiple renovations and property openings. She then made the transition to private clubs when she joined the executive team at Congressional Country Club. Her passion for the club industry led her to start ASB Hospitality prior to joining KOPPLIN, KUEBLER, and WALLACE, where she specializes in food and beverage training and consulting and executive search. Annette is passionate about building a strong foundation for the team she works with. She believes in lifelong training and specializes in building leadership and service teams' product knowledge, service skills, and the development of great systems. Her leadership strengths include creating a collaborative culture of inclusion, innovation, and development. She thrives on building efficient systems focused on communication, delivery of excellent service, and hospitality experiences. She's an expert in developing training materials, public speaking, committee owner and board communication, and extensive team leadership through improvement. Without further ado, I give you over to the two of the most talented ladies I know in the industry. Cheers.
Thank you.
Thanks, Felicia.
So I have started sharing my screen, and I am actually going to stop the video so you can focus completely on what is being said, and we can focus completely on the presentation. So on that note, I'm going to actually hand it over to Annette to give us a quick, maybe further introduction.
Well, I'm sure there's a lot of you on this training today that I've met and or have worked with before in the past. So it's always a pleasure to present at my local chapter. I'm actually out of town today. I'm down in Florida at the beautiful Lauderdale Yacht Club. So I'm in a meeting room here with some of the leaders from that team as well. So coming to you from warmer weather. Jen and I met working at the Four Seasons, and we actually first met when I was the acting food and beverage director at the Four Seasons Lanai, and she came in to train my team. And when she came in to train my team, the way she trained and the information that she delivered, it was like something connected in my mind. And I thought, why doesn't every team have this training? You know, taking the simple concepts of things we assume people know and delivering them to the team in a way in which they could understand. So Jen and I formed a friendship, and I think as a strong leader, what you have to do is surround yourself with people that are smarter than you. And Jen's always been one of those people for me. And when I got to Vail, the Four Seasons Vail as the food and beverage director, I brought Jen in again to train my team. And then when I left the Four Seasons, I moved over to Congressional. Jen was one of the first phone calls I made. And I called her and said, I'm going to the world of private clubs. I think I'm going to need your help. And so when I got to congressional, we brought her in and she helped us evaluate our service. And then she ultimately helped us build our standards training manual, which is the foundation of which we operated off of. And that's what we're going to talk to you about today, is building a great standards training manual. So Jen, a little bit more about you.
So just a quick history of my background to elaborate on both what Annette and Alicia spoke upon. My history, my professional experience came mostly from the time I spent in New York. So I spent about 8 years working for Danny Meyer of Union Square Hospitality Group. If you're not familiar with his New York-centric restaurants and concepts, you're likely familiar with Shake Shack. So I actually helped open and operate the very first Shake Shack in its inaugural summer about 13 years ago. Learned a lot from that, needless to say. Then spent the next 4 years working for Chef John George von Gerichten. So I got to basically travel around the world, work with a very highly specialized opening team, and open different restaurants and different concepts across a number of Starwood properties. And then in 2012, as Annette mentioned, I started this relationship with the Four Seasons. I was able to do some operational visits for the first year. The second year, they hired me to really revamp and revise all of their training material. And then for the last 7 years, myself and now Annette and now a team of 4 female trainers, we've conquered the world. So we now do the training worldwide. We're taking this training and potentially building it into an online platform. So a lot of really great potential things to do with this STM once you create it. So I'm going to hand it back over to Annette. For some reason, hold on one second. I apologize. It doesn't seem to want to advance the slide when I have screen sharing. So sorry, it doesn't seem to. Alicia, anyone have any suggestions? I'm so sorry. This is a little embarrassing. Can't get the slide to advance.
Huh.
Kate?
I'm going to see, yeah, let me see.
The joys of training through Zoom.
Yeah, I don't, it's not, I can't access it either from my screen.
Okay, let's.
I wonder if I can share mine.
Try.
Annette, you should be able to, all panelists have the capability to share their screen, so.
Let me see.
If this doesn't work, you can always send me the PowerPoint and I can try and advance it from here.
Is it working, Jen, for you?
No, it's not. Yeah, I apologize. I can probably do it on.
Jen, can you try just closing your PowerPoint down and reopening it again and see if that helps?
Yep.
We got started a few minutes early, so we're good.
Sorry.
We'll get it sorted.
Oh, PowerPoint.
Okay, let me see if I can now share my screen.
There we go. Okay. We got it? Can everybody see the session objective?
Yep, we're good, Jen. We can see it now.
Okay, I apologize for that. That's why we did the practice session, but for some reason it worked then and it doesn't work now. So let's continue. Annette.
Excellent. Okay, the session objective for building a successful standards training manual is that we're going to be providing you with a roadmap for developing comprehensive food and beverage training.
All right, it seems to only when I stop the video.
Okay,
Keep
so
going.
we're going to develop a roadmap for comprehensive food and beverage training manuals that reflect your individual club standards, your culture, and the traditions, while then you're supporting the ongoing training for your teams and delivering excellent hospitality. So if we've done our job today, that's what we're going to cover.
My goodness.
Is it not advancing still?
Still not advancing again now when I've added. No, it's not advancing again.
Jen, do you want to try sending it to me?
Sure.
Can everybody see my screen? If I do this?
I can see your screen, Annette.
Okay, you can. So let me try. Yes, no. Okay.
I'll say, yeah, I can see it.
All right, wonderful. Okay. Our agenda is to define the standards training manual, the presentation of the manual and what should be included, review what you should mention about history, tradition, and culture, talk about how this becomes the roadmap for your organization, what content should be included. We'll cover some do's and do nots, and then we'll talk about how do you keep this alive. So to begin with, what is an STM? Standards Training Manual. So we Googled and looked up some definitions about what is an STM, and really it's a consolidated list of instructions that's designed to improve the quality of your tasks, right? An introduction to a subject matter. When you have a new employee or new team member come on board, it's their reference point. It's an outline that they need to follow with all of the necessary information for them to be successful at their job. And it's more than just a document. This needs to be a foundation for the culture of your organization and your individual club and what is special about that. It needs to be a great resource, something that your team are able to go back to and reference throughout their time working at the club. It's also a tool for accountability. If your standards training manual is completely up to date and accurate, then it's a tool to hold your team accountable to, because it is the one-stop shop for what behavior looks like and what standards look like within your organization. It is the last word on those things, but it's continually evolving. If you change something within your team, or you change something within your organization, or how you do something, the first thing that you need to update is the standards training manual. Jen, I'm going to kick it over to you for a presentation.
So I think this slide really says it all. Presentation is everything. This training manual will be one of, if not the very first thing that you hand to a new employee on their first day on the job. And when they open that book, every single page is a snapshot of your culture, of your attention to detail, of your expectations, your history, your rules, your leadership and membership, and your relevance and prominence in the club industry. So everything that they see and everything that is inside is critically important, because ultimately it's a reflection of you. We'll discuss the content and the specifics a bit later in this session, but what the material says, the information it conveys, is only part of the equation. So it's equally important that the presentation of the material is cohesive and thoughtful, and that the language and the text are correct. So I like to think about it like this. If you were to go to buy a book at a store, or read a menu at a restaurant, or read a publicly posted sign, you'd have the general expectation that it looks and feels like a professional presentation or a professional document. Words should be spelled correctly. Margins should be consistently aligned. Font should be the same size, style, and type throughout, or used strategically to differentiate the messages and sections. Color themes should be followed, the pages are laid out evenly, etc. Because if not, it's simply not taken seriously. So if you want your training material to be taken seriously and used as the comprehensive resource it was meant to be, then you really have to approach it like a professional document. So I think it's also important to contextualize why any of this matters. For me, it's a bit of a quid pro quo, or in other words, leading by example, exhibiting the behavior that you expect from your teams, because inevitably, you will be asking your teams to have attention to detail, to align the wares on a table and to make sure that the silverware and glassware is polished, to recognize numbers by name, to memorize ingredients and preparations for menu items, to follow your guidelines for behavior and to uphold excellent service standards. So ultimately, if the training material that you are using to present and document this attention to detail does not reflect that attention to detail itself, if it's haphazardly thrown together or copied and pasted and has spelling and grammar errors or outdated and irrelevant content, then what it does is dilute that message of attention to detail. Because if your club can't have attention to detail in your training materials, then how can you expect your employees to have it in real life? So Annette, if you don't mind going back just one slide. Sorry. Yeah, so let's first talk about the look and feel of the document, starting with general aesthetics. So you have page layout and continuity. Basically, what does each page consist of? So while text will obviously be the main component to convey information, it should also be a mix of graphics and text boxes and images and icons. Also, are the page breaks in the correct place and between sections, or does the information bleed or get awkwardly cut off from one page to another? Next, you have margins and spacing. Is everything lined up the same way from section to section and page to page, and for all bullet points and tabs and indentation? For spacing, is that consistent in both the word spacing and then line spacing and then spacing between sections? Columns in alignment, is the text centered, left, right, justified, or all of the above? And then you also have tools to differentiate the segments and emphasize the different messages. So first and foremost, graphics, images, and tables. This is what really makes your document come to life and breaks up the monotony of the text. It's also a great tool to supplement the text and add clarity that maybe the text itself cannot, by offering a visual example of sample behaviors. Next, there's font size, style, and type. Now, there's nothing wrong with having multiple font sizes and styles throughout the document. I would actually encourage that, but it needs to be done deliberately. And again, with the purpose of differentiating between the various STM sections. And then finally, color. So colors are a great visual as well, but use a consistent theme. You can customize the document settings to match the color of your club so that the palette that it chooses from is automatically generated. So next we have the text itself. Do you want to go into the next slide? Nope, back one. Oh, sorry. Yep, I'm sorry, you had already advanced it. So first and foremost, let's talk about spelling and grammar. This may seem obvious, but words should be spelled and used correctly. At the very, very least, run a spell and grammar check in Word. You have the tools already there. But since we all know that spelling and grammar check does not catch everything, you will also need to thoroughly copy edit with your eyeballs for those mistakes that spell check will never catch. A simple example being the difference between form and from. Next, you have writing style, voice, and tone. Is the tone casual or formal? Is it conversational or dictatorial? And is it consistent throughout? So was it clearly written by one person, or was it written by many people, or copied and pasted from various sources? Also be wary of all caps. Much like email etiquette, it really can be perceived as yelling, or it can be like crying wolf if overused. Not everything is that important. So use all caps with discretion and only for true instances of emphasis. Alternative options for emphasis are font styles like bold, italics, or underlining. Next, we have punctuation and capitalization, very similar to the rules for writing style and voice and tone. Not every sentence is an exclamation. Not every thought needs to be open-ended with ellipsis. And then for capitalization, not every noun is proper. Now, if you capitalize club or member, that's fine. That's also very common. Even though those aren't proper nouns in real life, it's very common to think of them as such. And that's fine, but make sure you do it everywhere. Or if you capitalize all job titles or all departments, that's fine too. Just make sure you're consistent. Next, you have tense or point of view. So are things happening now or in the future or hypothetically? Or to or by me or you or one? Tense can be the difference between once you've poured the wine or after pouring the wine. And then point of view, so first versus third person, and then possession. So the difference between you versus we versus one or the server, or the difference between the guests or your guests or our guests. And then finally, ease of reading. So how easy or difficult is the information to follow and comprehend and sift through? Is there a logical order to the document? Is there a logical progression of topics from beginning to end? Is the right amount of content presented in the most effective ways to offer detail, but also without overwhelming or losing the reader? And then does the eye flow easily from one section and page to the next, or does it jump from one spot to the other? And so what I wanted to do very quickly was give you just a few examples of not necessarily the good, bad, and the ugly, but what good and then great looks like. So this is an example of good in the sense it's very comprehensive information, but it's not great in the sense of how it's presented. So this is the training material from a property I worked with, Carmel Country Club in North Carolina. And as part of my visit, one of their takeaways, one of the goals that they set was to take their existing training material, which was 9 kind of very vastly different modules, and recondense it and make sure to revise it based on all the training that we had done with their teams. And so the way they tackled it was to take this project and divvy it up amongst the managers. And so certain managers worked on this module, a different set of managers collaborated on another. And what they came up with was a 5-module training manual. So these are different pages and excerpts that have been pulled from all of those different modules. Now, if you really just take the graphics and the visuals into context right here, on the left, right, you'll see a very comical, almost cartoonish graphic. Right, not sure if that's even appropriate to be used for the training manual. Next, under the how-tos, you have some really beautiful images that very clearly demonstrate what the talking point is and how to carry a plate properly. So those are nice images, but then it doesn't really match the other images or the other graphics being used. The third panel that you see is obviously just something that was copied and pasted from either a screenshot or existing training material online. So the visuals don't match, the graphics don't look the same, there's different language, different bullet points, different everything. And then the information you see again all the way on the right is good information, but not consistent with anything that we've seen thus far. And so the example of better would be the next slide, which is yours truly.
And Congressional Country Club. Jen, are you there? I think have we lost her? Okay, so this is the standards training manual that we put together at Congressional with Jen's assistant. She came in and walked through all of our different materials together. And she was able to create a consistent theme throughout with the help of a very talented graphic designer that worked on our team at the time as well. And as you can see, there's a consistent theme for the material, the consistent flow through the material of who we are and how we behave and how we'll succeed. And then consistent use of graphics throughout the document as well. And everything ties in and consistently throws through the presentation here. And Jen just told me she's about to reconnect. I don't know if she mentioned she's in Mexico and they just had a hurricane a couple weeks ago, so her power's still been going on and off. So we'll give her a little bit of forgiveness for that down in Playa del Carmen there. So as you can see, it's a real difference between this slide and this slide when you really put thought to the presentation of your standards training materials. So then as you move through your document, looking at the presentation and layout as well, really making sure that we take all of those other points into consideration. And I'm gonna see when Jen reconnects here because these are her particular talking points, but you know, you're really making sure that everything flows appropriately, that everything is indented appropriately throughout here as well. Jen, are you back?
I'm back. This is the perils of internet in Mexico. I'm so sorry. Okay, I am back. So I'm sure Annette did a great job with the continuation of what I was saying. This is a similar example of some pages pulled from Carmel's workbook. And again, a lot of text to sort through, very difficult to do so without that use of the graphics and images. And then all the text really presented in different ways in different formats. So you have the font on the left, 2 panels that match but are maybe different spacing, different sized font, justified and spaced differently. And then the 2 on the right generally match each other but are very different from the rest. And then even simple things like both use color for emphasis, but it's even 2 different shades of red. So again, not a lot of consistency. And then what that does is really take from your ability to digest the material, and what it really becomes is just a distraction. Then, sorry, I did also want to take a moment to talk about what I mean by some of those copy editing elements. Some people have an eye for this, some people don't. Right? Some people might look at this page and think it's formatted perfectly, but I wanted to take time to really go through some different elements on this even one page that could potentially be improved. So first you have margins. There you go. So you have 5 different stopping points on the left-hand side. And then the other margins, if you click again in it, clearly both of these lines are centered, but they're not centered using the same margins because they're not following the same center. Next, you have the different font sizes and styles. So there's 2 that match. You have the definition of service and the keys to professionalism, same size and type font. Just beneath that, you have the same size font, but in italics instead of regular. All the way at the bottom, you have the same font, but a different size. Then all the way back up to the top, the standards of service, you have the same font as positive attitude, but underlined instead. And then in the middle, the member recognition and the 1-minute service are in all caps for no real reason. Next, you have alignment. So the sections that you see at the top and the bottom, those are justified, whereas the sections underneath and around them are centered, and then the rest of the document is all justified to the left. Next, you have spacing, so inconsistency in the spacing between the sections, right? And then also inconsistency in the spacing between the bullet pointed numbers and then the text that comes after them. And then the use of different bullet points and numbers, right? So in some places we're using numbers and in other places we're using bullet points for, again, no real rhyme or reason. And then finally, some specifics with language. So in some places, the numbers, as you'll see, Annette, if you want to click again, sorry. You'll see numbers listed as the word 3 and then the number 3 in parentheses, the word 2 and then the number 2 in parentheses. Whereas in other places, you have either just the word 1 or just the number 1 when talking about 1-minute service. So if you look at each of these, again, maybe you may or may not have the ability to spot any or all of these on the page. And if this was just one mistake or one issue, you would probably read through it and never see it. But once you really add up the sum of the total of all of these little things that are wrong, Annette, if you want to go to the next slide, it really becomes a little overwhelming, right? So you start seeing red arrows and copy editing marks really all over the place. And again, this, back to that idea of leading by example, it's really hard to hold your teams accountable to attention to detail when you don't have that same attention to detail in your training material itself. So on that note, I will hand it back over to Annette.
Thank you, Jen. And I'm impressed that you put that slide together with all those arrows.
Thank you. It's all about the animation.
Ladies and gentlemen, that's attention to detail. So as you move into your manual, making sure that your standards training manual reflects the history, tradition, and culture of your organization. So making sure that when your employees show up at work for the first day, that they're learning about the mission of the club. What is the mission statement of your organization? And vision. So the mission right now, and what is the vision for the future? What are you working towards? And how, as a new employee coming into that organization, am I going to know what the vision for the future is and what is my part in that? Expectations for behavior. So how do we expect our employees to behave when they're at work? How are they supposed to behave on the floor? How are they supposed to behave with each other? What does acceptable behavior look like? What verbiage do they use? What postures do they use? And you know, the more I do this, the more I realize that I don't know anything, or that it's different everywhere, right? The more I learn, the less I know, and everywhere has a slightly different expectation for those things. I work with clubs in Texas where it's perfectly acceptable to say y'all, or a local colloquialism that is fine for that membership. Whereas some of the clubs in my local area, when I'm up in Maryland, are much more formal, much more strict with our language and our verbiage and the things that we're allowed to say. What are the core tenets of who you are, right? What are your core values? I'm looking at Lauderdale's right here. We've got integrity and family oriented and sociability and exclusiveness and inclusiveness. What are those values, and how do you lead, and how do you demonstrate these through your standards training manual? So it's very clear from the moment you join the organization. And then who's your leadership team? Introduce yourselves. I had so much fun writing the introduction to the congressional manual, because I believe we make miracles happen every day, especially within food and beverage, right? I always joke, something's going wrong in food and beverage right now, right? So have a point of view and have a perspective in your introduction to the manual from the leadership team that reflects who you are as a leadership team. You're going to be working with these people every day. Let your personality come through. And then as a new team member, I want to know the history of your club. I want to know where you came from and how you got to this point today. And I know that we all have compelling stories. Somebody was passionate enough at one point in time to form this club. So how did they make that happen? Your A players are going to soak this up, and they're going to feel proud, and they're going to get on board, and they're going to feel lucky to be part of such a tradition and a history. And moving on to that, what are your traditions? What are the things that make your club special? The rum bun at Congressional is the one that always comes to mind, right? How do you elevate the thing that defines your club's food and beverage experiences, and how do you make that special and change that without changing it? We used to have it in a bowl with a tablecloth over the top of it, and it pulled the icing off. And so we bought a nice little container, and we made a little sign, and we wrote the Congressional Rum Bun, decades in the making, and elevated the rum bun through that. And we told the story of that in our manual and to new employees. So with that, what are stories? What are legends? What are things that employees would like to hear and learn that led up to what you do in your organization? And then pictures and archives. So I've been building the standards training material for Loxahatchee here in Florida, and they have this amazingly cute little turtle logo, and it's a turtle, and he's got a golf club over his shoulder, and we've infused that into the manual. We have our turtle talking points. So their culture and their tradition is infused throughout their manual, special to them. And then the membership. You have to realize for a moment that a lot of these team members coming in, they don't know what a private club is, or they don't know what it feels like to be a member of a private club. What does it mean to be a member? What does it take to be a member? And who are your membership? You want to make sure you introduce them to that. You'll have employees that come in from independent restaurants or hotels or resorts or from other industries. We need to explain to them about governance. We need to explain to them about how we change up our boards. What does the board look like? Who is on the board? Really encouraged to have pictures of the board and or the names of the board members that you update every year so that your team know who those people are and know what they look like. And then any accolades that you have, right? Are you a platinum club? Have you been recognized for something? Is there something special that you're a part of in your local area? Do you help with a local homeless shelter, or is there something that you do that you've been recognized for? You one of the best places to work in your area? Have you received that recognition? Include all of those things in with your standards training material, because that's going to, those team members that come on board, they're going to feel tremendously proud and they're going to soak this up. And it also helps them when they first join the organization to assimilate and feel welcome and part of the team. So then we also need to cover the food and beverage team, right? If this is a food and beverage standards training manual, if it's not a food and beverage standards training manual, then the golf team or the tennis team or whatever other team you're building the material for. Who are you? Have a fun picture of you all. One of my coworkers, Michelle Ricklin, and I, we have some fun pictures of ourselves at the start of our training that we do with the 5 pillars of hospitality so that our personality shines through. Maybe it's not just a headshot of you. Maybe it's something that reflects your personality. Your team members are going to come in and they're going to be working with you every single day. And they're going to be working with the real fun, amazing you, not just the polished professional photo of you. The other departments within the organization, we always want to break down silos. They're part of a bigger organization, so make sure that they know, like, who is the golf pro? Who's the director of athletics? Who is the director of aquatics, right? What did they look like? What do they do, right? What is an aquatics program at a club? What does that include? Make sure that there's a little bit of information about each area, and then we're not talking about orientation, but as a sidebar, make sure that when someone comes on board to the club and you're walking through these in your manual, that maybe you take them to those areas, definitely take them to those areas so they can see the other parts of the club and they can make connections with other co-workers. Make sure the organizational chart is in here so they know who's who and where they fall within the organization. And then make sure that we cover the dress code as well and any club rules, because it's already intimidating to come into some of our clubs as it is. We want to make sure that we don't embarrass or make any of our new employees feel uncomfortable because we didn't tell them about a dress code before their first day. We didn't tell them about a club rule on their first day. We want to make them feel comfortable. We want them to know what all of these things are and how to relate to our club. So history, tradition, and culture. So making sure that we're defining and fostering our culture with every new employee from day one. Every single new employee that we bring on board shifts the culture a little bit. And as our hiring practices, we should make sure that we're hiring people that are going to be embracing our history, tradition, and culture. And those people, we want to make them excited. We want them to feel proud. We want them to go home and say, my goodness, my first day at the club was incredible. I have all this material, and your A players will soak this up and read it from cover to cover and be super excited to be a part of it. So moving on to the standards training manual as a roadmap. I kind of have an analogy in my mind that when I read a standards training manual, and I get to read a lot of them nowadays, when I'm reading it, I want to think about, I'm a new employee, I'm starting my journey with the club, I'm starting my career. So here I am on day one. Where am I right now? Where am I going to go? Is there a natural flow and progression through the standards training manual? What tools and equipment do I need? What things am I going to learn along the way? How will I know when I'm arrived? Are there tests or stopping points or quizzes or role plays? And then if I forgot something, can I go back? Is all the information that I need covered in that manual. So moving on with that in mind to basic content, Jen.
So basic content, obviously at some point we do need to now talk about the information to include that is relevant to food and beverage, relevant to your restaurants, relevant to your operations. So the basic elements you see listed here are a great start to making the document both more presentable and more easily navigated. So cover page, this goes without saying, I hope, but have a cover page. Include a picture of your club or your crest or a recently taken team photo. Remember, this is the first of that first impression. So try to make it beautiful, try to make it aesthetically pleasing. Next, have a table of contents and use the functionality available to you in Word. Create a table of contents. This way automatically updates the section title and pages. And it makes it easier to get both a snapshot of and a quick guide to specific information. Include a welcome letter. As Annette mentioned, I was just reading Congressionals the other day and it was very inspiring. It's great. It's personalized. It's written in her voice. It's from her. This is your opportunity to speak directly from your heart to the employees, and particularly a new hire. So this welcome letter should be from the division head or the GM, and it should speak to not only your food and beverage program and your department, but it should speak to your club values and history and future, and how that correlates to what happens in that employee's department and what is expected from them accordingly. And finally, it's never a bad idea to leave space for notes, either at the beginning, at the end of the document, or in smaller format throughout, which is also a nice way to fill any spaces that are left when using page breaks between sections at the bottom of the page. So next we have the restaurant content, right? You obviously need to include some information about your different restaurants, but make sure to include information regarding not only the employee's specific outlet, but all outlets. There's no reason that an employee of your grill or your grab and go not be informed as to what happens in the steakhouse or the pub. So include information on all the cuisines and concepts, the menu highlights and price ranges, the hours of operation, dress code, reservations policies, etc. As a side note, and Annette did touch on this earlier about including other departments, you should also consider including an overview of other departments' parameters, such as golf or aquatics or fitness, and similar information, so hours, dress code, fees, access points and restrictions, seasonal availability. Because ultimately the goal of this project as a whole, whether it's for the club or whether it's for food and beverage specifically, or whether it's for a different department, the goal is to keep your employees as informed as possible as to what is happening every day, everywhere in the club. And then also include operational specific information. So opening and closing checklists, floor plans and sections, safety checklists, evacuation plans, and so on. Next, we have product content, very, very critically important and often forgotten in the mix of all of this other information that we're trying to jam inside. So you need to include information that is specific to the product, pertaining to your ingredients, brands that you carry, sources or farms that you support, and then various food terms and definitions that they might get asked about that are present on the menus. Also include some information on not only common allergy types, but your particular policy and protocol for addressing allergies, the difference between allergies and dietary restrictions and how you might handle those differently, and then items that can and cannot be substituted for various other ingredients. Also remember that while the technical product information is critical, it's also critical that you include some information on how to describe and sell these products. That is not going to happen by itself. So how to create your spiels, vocabulary to use or to avoid, and then how to make effective recommendations. And then of course, also include current copies of all menus. Now, I only stress current because I know that this is one of the most common places other than online menus where we might forget to update the information as it's been updated in our restaurants. So make sure that the manual is always updated and has the current menus as well as the detailed menu item descriptions for all of the items on the menu. And then finally, you of course need content that speaks to your service. In fact, this will often be the bulk of the training material in the STM. Before we talk about the specifics of the service content, I do want to take a moment to emphasize a bigger picture thought that really applies to everything that we're speaking about in this training session. So when you take on this task of revamping or creating this STM, this training material, it's really an opportunity to go through everything. I mean, literally everything that you have or everything that you intend to create, and go through it with a fine-tooth comb. And when you do, ask yourself, first of all, ask yourself, is this information true? Is this correct? Do we really act this way or require this behavior or still follow this standard? Is this information relevant? Maybe we did this once, but do we still do this now? Does this reflect our current club, our current culture, operations, policies, membership, or industry standards? Is it modern or is it antiquated? And most importantly, because the whole point of this SDM is to be used as training material, can we train to this information? Is everything in the STM an actual reflection of what we teach people? Or does it reflect an ideal but not so realistic reality? And what I've learned for both the experience of writing manuals and then trying to train to that information is that the part of the STM where this information sifting and this question asking process is the most critical are the service components. I've literally done hundreds of service trainings for teams of all service styles and experience levels all over the globe. And what I can tell you in honesty is that it is a mess out there. Rarely, if ever, is the team and the division aligned regarding the sequence of service or how to execute it. There are different expectations and styles and points of view and priorities between the club and the restaurant management teams. And there's further differences and inconsistencies between each manager, between each employee, and between the front and the back of the house. And then worst of all, if none of these variations or opinions on how to do things match what is actually documented in your STM, what it does is diminish the use of an STM as a tool. It's diminished in its capacity as a singular point of reference, and ultimately its credibility is affected. Because if even one small part of it is not current or not accurate, it detracts from the validity of all of the other components that are. So use this as an opportunity to review all of your service-related material and make sure it's aligned on all fronts. Right? That all of the stakeholders who have to execute this actually have a voice and a say in what is included, and everyone agrees to what's expected, and that is what makes it into the STM for posterity. And then don't forget about the soft skills. These steps of service are just the technical components, right? What happens when and where and by whom. It's the rules. But equally important to that are the emotional aspects of service, right? How to read the guest, how to recognize the guest, how to customize and personalize the experience. So how, when, and why to break all those rules, right? All those rules that we established with those technical components, how, when, and why to break them is also critically important information to include as well. So again, I wanted to give you just a few examples. One of the first projects I took on that I mentioned with the Four Seasons back in 2012, after I'd done some operational visits across the company, was really revising and recompiling their training material. So what you have in front of you is the dinner sequence of service that I was handed from the Four Seasons. Now, one of the struggles they were having is that their service style, admittedly by them, was very formal, very stuffy, right? Very technically driven and not very emotional based. And one of the problems immediately after the bat from what I saw is the fact that there were 56 steps of service, literally 56 individual tasks that you were expected to perform, right, within the sequence of service. That's just lunacy. And so what we did first and foremost was sift through this, ask those same questions. Is this the right information? Is this still relevant? Does this make sense? Can we train to this? And so what I did is take this, and if you go to the next slide, turn it into something that I think was more digestible. We took 56 steps of service and crystallized that into 27, right? A much simpler, a much more concise presentation of that information. On the next page, what you'll see is an example of their how-to, right? This is 2 full pages, about 20 different bullet points, about 15 different numbers of information solely on the how-to of how to take a reservation. Now, all the blue spaces you see are then also sections where the properties could add more information or customize it based on their particular way of doing things. So this 2-page spread on how to take a reservation could potentially become 3, 4, 5, 6 pages, all on simply how to take a reservation. So again, what I did was take this and kind of rejigger it into something more digestible and really try to isolate and define the simple how-tos. And so what you see in the left-hand corner, and then if you just want to press enter, what you see in the left-hand corner, that is the how-to, right? It's the simple step-by-step, almost physical tasks that you go through for how to take a reservation. Now, the rest of the information is obviously still important. You don't want to lose that, but you also have to reformat into categories and topics to make it more digestible. So behaviors, do this, don't do that. Verbiage, say this, don't say that. Some sample dialogue. And then finally, the best practices. So all of those variables and if and when and under these circumstances that were originally included in how to are taken out, but they're still included here just as a separate section so you can address those variables separately. And then finally, bringing it to life, right? You probably thought that creating the standards training manual was the hardest part, but it's not, right? The hardest part is actually yet to come, which is actually now breathing life into this document that you've created. Right now, the goal is to use it. So the great news is that not only does the STM provide this supplementary training material, but it also provides an exact guide of topics to talk about. So what I would recommend doing is creating a monthly training calendar and then break that down further by week and by day, decide ahead of time, meaning decide this quarter for next quarter, not ahead of time, meaning 10 minutes for my training, 10 minutes from now, right? So decide this quarter for next quarter, exactly what your training topics and talking points are, exactly what you'll be tasting every single day. And then finally, you'll need some additional tools for accountability, right? Either worked into the STM itself, such as quizzes or chapter reviews. And then also related but separate tools, such as an employee recognition program that also reinforces and rewards these behaviors. And then clear documentation of consequences for underperformance. So if you quickly go back to the other slide, this is an example. Again, that same Club Caramel that I worked with. Nope, back to the calendar. Yep. What I did was take that training manual, that STM that they created, and try to really consolidate and pull out some talking points for food, beverage, service, keywords, and then vocabulary. So along the left-hand column, you'll see just those categories broken out by theme, right? And what each separate week's theme would be. Across days of the week, it then shows you the specific product or product category to talk about, whether you're talking about a verbiage or a rule or behavior. And then the only thing that the property really has to worry about on a daily basis, right, in addition to actually fleshing out those talking points from the STM, is those sections that you see in yellow. So what exactly food and beverage they're tasting for the day. Then as part of the supplementary tools on the next slide, this was both a quiz that I created for them and then a template to use for their daily pre-shift briefing. So again, tools to use that worked aligned with that monthly training and daily training topics that the property was talking about anyway. And then last but not least, keeping it alive, right? If you don't work on this daily, monthly, weekly, then literally all of this has been for nothing. So to keep this alive, it can't just be the management's responsibility, right? So choose and select and empower designated trainers. Have specific people on your team that you can ensure uphold all of these behaviors, right? That they train and act consistently to those behaviors. Use them as designated trainers so you can help ensure that every single new hire's experience is identical. And then create new hire checklists so you can systematically make sure that you've conveyed this information and reviewed every single section of that STM. I would also recommend keeping the STM in the operations, right? Have a hard copy that the staff can really refer to in times of need. What's in this menu item? Can this be substituted? What does this mean? What happens after I clear the table, right? Any reason that they may need to go check on the fly in that moment, which they can't do if it only exists as a computer file. And finally, update as often as needed. Right? If this information is not true and accurate and correct and relevant, what that does, as I mentioned earlier, is really detract from the overall effectiveness, the overall use of this STM as a tool. So to wrap up, I'm going to hand it back over to Annette, and she's going to quickly go through some do's and don'ts and an overview, and then we'll get to some questions.
So your standards training manual is specific to you and to your club. Don't make it generic and don't make it negative. It should be a positive tool that gets people excited to work there and train and learn. It needs to be specific to the department in which you're creating it. So it needs to be specific to food and beverage. It's not the same as your HR manual. It's not the same as your policies and procedures or your standard operating procedures. It should be positive. It should be upbeat. It should be exciting. It should not be a list of things that are going to get you fired if you do this. I sadly see so many that I read it and I'm terrified because literally it's just telling me everything I can do to lose my job. And it does need to be living, breathing, evolving. As Jen mentioned, we're going to expect our teams to live to these standards and uphold them. So we need to make sure that we're continually evolving and updating this document. It should change throughout the course of your organization's history. We do need to focus on the basics. Don't assume that your team know anything. Don't assume anybody's told them how they should be standing on the floor of the restaurant. Don't assume that they know what mirepoix is or the mother sauce is or what arugula tastes like. If there are things in your organization that are specific or different or unique, make sure that they're in there. Make sure that you include really detailed descriptions and data, but don't get overly lost in all of the detail. You need to be able to read it and understand it. So be mindful of the total section and length, and don't overwhelm them with content. I've just recently, for a club, created a product knowledge library, which is separate from the STM. We've taken product knowledge is really important to them. And so we've taken all of the product knowledge and made it one complete separate binder with much more detail about their product and their menu items and their beverages. And we just have it as a separate document that they update more regularly because they change their menus more regularly. So for them, it works to have a separate product knowledge binder outside of their STM that they keep in their outlet. Make sure it's thoughtful and well edited. Don't rush through the process. And then also make sure that you're not blatantly plagiarizing or copying another club's manual. Jen and I know for a fact that there are several copies of the congressional manual out in the club world that a few other won't be named clubs have taken, copy pasted, not very well, I might add, and the margins are not the same and they've just changed the color and it's word for word the same manual. You know, nothing we do is particularly proprietary. Service is service, but you at least want to make it look like your own manual. I read a couple recently that have clearly been taken from independent restaurants because it says they haven't done the search and replace for certain words. So there's an independent restaurant's name in amongst the club's manual instead of the club's restaurant. So it's very obvious that these places didn't take the time to go through and have a thoughtful standards training manual for their team. And if I'm a new employee, I see that and I think, well, the leadership rushed through this. They didn't care to put this together. Is that going to be my experience working there? So do customize it, make it unique to your club. And then also lastly, this is a really important document. This is the foundation for what your team are going to see from day one. This is going to take them through their training until you release them and set them free into the world of your club. Deliver great service to the membership. Don't give this to an intern or a manager in training or, you know, the lowest paid employee or newest person on the team. This should go to a senior manager or should be outsourced to a professional that can ask the right questions and put the right materials together. So if you're going to do it in-house, make sure it's someone that has worked there for a while that knows the operations inside and out. And with that, do we have any questions? Alicia, jump back on here.
I'll ask a question, Annette. I'm just wondering, in today's environment, with sometimes these manuals needing to be updated so frequently, especially in today's world, and how we do them, is there any sense that it could all be electronically based and that would still deliver the same feel? Or do you think that it has to be done something in hard copy because it's like that tangible take home that employee needs the first time?
Yeah, that's a great question. And Jen, if you don't mind, I'll start and then maybe piggyback in here. You do have to think about that, right? If you're going to bind it and heat seal it and spiral bind it, it's very difficult to update. What I like to do is give every employee a binder, 3 rings, hole punch it. They can add things, remove things, very easily update it. If you have the technology to have everything on your phone and you have an STM on your phone, then fantastic. That's great. If you can push through information to people's computers, great. But then if your employees need to look at something, they're going to be looking at their phone. So it depends on your club and it depends on your level of comfort with technology with regards to how you do that.
And then just to piggyback on that, I actually worked with a Four Seasons property a while back, and they had chosen, they probably had 100+ employees going through this program. So a ton of payroll being outlaid, it was a 200-page manual asking to print. There's like thousands and thousands of pages and dollars. And so they said both for the environment, for practical purposes, we're going to have 1 copy per table and offer it to them electronically. And for the most part, that was a success, but I would say probably about 20 to 30% of the employees either came up to me or came up to them afterwards and asked for a physical hard copy. And so I think it just speaks to different people's preferences and ability to learn too, right? Some people listen, some people read, some people need one to reinforce the other. And so obviously we want to be mindful of not wasting paper and not updating this every day, and you can't send it out to be bound, once a month. But I agree with Annette, as long as the hard copy that you use can be something like a binder to easily take material in and out of, then that's probably the best approach. And then when you do mass training or when you re-release it, let's say once a year, then that might be the time to have them professionally printed or bound again. But I think it also speaks to different people's learning styles. And so I think it's actually important to have both as a tool.
You ladies had another question that came in. What is the time commitment to create an STM?
It really depends on the scope of the work, right? What you want in that manual and what you have existing already. So I believe, Annette, correct me if I'm wrong, the project with Congressional, it probably took about a full dedicated 40 to 80 hours, 1 to 2 full-time dedication work of me and only me to get that up and running. And then admittedly, they took the material. So there was an editing process. Obviously, we both went through it together. So there was some collaborative meetings. And then they took that and then sent it off to a professional graphic designer and printer to kind of put the final touches on. So I would say end to end, if you really diligently work on this and if you have a decent amount of material to start with, it's probably a full-time job for, let's say, 2 to 4 weeks, right? And again, I probably did it in a week and a half to 2 because I've done this a lot and I had a lot of my own material I could use as a resource. But if you're starting with scratch, I would say at least 1 to 2 months. And if you're not starting from scratch and if you're outsourcing, if you need to budget for it, I would say it's probably, again, like on average of about 2 weeks of solid work.
Another question came in that says, what is your suggestion to get all the materials to those where English isn't their first language? Do you have the manual translated into different languages, or do you just budget time accordingly to sit down with that individual to have it translated?
A couple different viewpoints on that. We train in Mexico, and Jen's down in Mexico. We train in Mexico in English. When I was in Los Cabos last year, the entire team was trained in English because they were expected to know that for the guests. So I guess it depends on your club and your expectation of your employees. If you have front-facing employees that cannot communicate in English or they can't read in English, then yes, you might want to take key sections of the manual or key standards of the manual and have them translated, or have a manager or a trainer that's part of the team that sits down with them and translates it. right? We want to take that into consideration with our team, but also then if we have front-facing employees that need to learn all of this that are struggling, maybe we need to look at that too. Jen.
Yeah, we've done a lot of the training we've done has been for the Four Seasons, and the expectation for them is that if you are a guest-facing employee, that you are generally conversational in English. But obviously that varies widely from property to property and region to region. I do sometimes find that when people learn in a different language, they actually learn a little bit more and a little bit better, right? Whereas native English speakers just tend to tune you out like blah, 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 right? If they don't know the language, right, this is an opportunity for them to learn, and they actually have to pay a lot more attention if that is happening in a different language. So again, it really, as Annette said, depends on your culture. And I would say that if you are going to translate the training, make it worth the bulk effort. So, translate the entire manual, and then instead of maybe doing one-off trainings with non-English speakers, get all of the Spanish speakers in a room and deliver one unified translated training to all of them, rather than just kind of piecemealing it one by one. And you can, of course, have individual sessions with the employees as follow-up, but maybe you do a larger bulk training for all of the Spanish speakers or all of the Vietnamese speakers or whatever those second languages are, and you do that as a whole. So you can kind of check a lot of boxes off with one session.
Another question came in that says, what do you suggest if a club doesn't have one at all?
Hire Annette and I.
No, that's the follow-up of it. Right? It said, are you, and it said, is Annette available to help clubs start the process, and where do you suggest they begin?
Absolutely. I think start with, sit down. Maybe it's your planning committee, maybe it's your division managers, and say, okay, what do we want to accomplish? Who are we? What's our dining style? What's our membership like? And then, of course, reach out to other clubs in your chapter. I'm sure everybody has some friend in a restaurant industry somewhere that has some manual for some restaurant they worked at some point in their career, right? And so maybe start by collecting what you think your material should be somewhat like, right? Start with what you like and start with a vision and at least a kind of objective of what you want that document to be, and then find some examples, right? If you were designing a web page and trying to explain to a designer what you want, you'd find other web pages to show them and say, I really like this. And so I think that's the first step, is really defining what you like, what you want the end product to look like, and what you want the end product to say, and then finding some examples of that. And I would bet that certainly clubs that have been around for a long time, right, have 20, 30, 50-year histories, you may not have existing documents that are relevant, and they may not have been recompiled in the last 10 or 15 years, but I bet if you probably search throughout all of your files, that you'd probably find some pretty good material in your club files and shared folders as well. So I think kind of start with what you want, and then take that to either somebody else or take that to a member of your team, but really start with some sort of vision. Annette, I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
And I think, ladies, those are all of your questions. Is there anything the two of you would like to add before we conclude today's education?
No, just thank you. And apologize immensely for the technical difficulties, though I guess it's kind of par for the course in this digital world these days, but my apologies. It looks like we ended on time, so no repercussions for it, but thank you for your patience and working through all those disconnections and frozen screens.
Yeah, you have one more that just came in, and it said, can you work with clubs virtually right now? You had talked about that earlier, that you were considering putting some of what your services are going virtually. So when do you anticipate that happening, or can you do this really right now virtually in this environment we're all in?
Yes. We're doing it every day. I'm here on site right now, but we're socially distanced. I've been training wearing a mask. I've been training 6 feet apart from people. And we've been doing online Zoom trainings. Yes, and Jen and I are talking about that, how we get better at it every day. So yes, and yes, whatever level of comfort you and your team have with the training you need to do, we're on board with it and we can execute on that.
Fantastic. All right, ladies, well, we certainly appreciate your time. Travel safely.
Yep.
We maybe hope you get your electricity back on track, Jen, with the working and everything's good. And I'm certain I speak for all of us that it was just very, very insightful and something that's very well needed at all time frames in hospitality. So very appreciative.
Great, good. You're very welcome. Thank you for having us.
All right, everyone, enjoy the rest of your afternoon. We look forward to seeing you when the details come out on November 9th, and we have November 17th as well. Have a fantastic rest of your week.
All right. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.